Welcome to Alive to Thrive here on KNSJ 89.1 FM. We're not on this earth merely to survive. We are alive to thrive. We have Shane O'Gara with us. He's the executive pastor of the Church of Salvation. Shane, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Shane O'Gara. I'm the executive pastor of the Church of Salvation. We also do homeless outreach where we've helped 53 people get off the streets from June 2022 to June 2023.
That is phenomenal. That is so exciting. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you're getting in touch with these people? I know later in the show we're going to talk about the weekly outreaches that you do. Is that how you find the people primarily to bring them into the program of getting them off the streets?
That's one way. We're also on 211, so people could call 211 and they can find us. The HRC, which is downtown, is they only deal with people in a 921 zip code, and so they also refer other people to us, and people just find us, plus the outreach. So it's been a great amount of people that have come through, so it's been really cool.
That's fantastic. And how did you originally get started with this work?
Man, that's my mentor actually got me into the Salvation Army, and I ended up being there for about 2 years, and that was in homeless outreach at the Salvation Army. And then I decided, hey, maybe I could do this better on my own. And I ended up getting funded and started going out there doing it.
That's amazing. And originally you said that you were from Boston, and a little bit from the information that you gave me, you felt like God called you to San Diego. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Oh yeah, man, the calling. That's a nice chapter in my book. I'm calling it The Calling. It was really interesting. I was in another church, and I was there for about 7 years, and God sat me down one day and he said, I want you to move to San Diego and open a church. And I said, I'm not where I want to be at, Lord. I don't have all the right credentials, you know what I mean? And he said, what are you going to do when you see me and I asked you why you didn't go? I said, forget this, I'm out. I talked to my wife and I said, hey, God is calling me to San Diego. You want to come or not? And she was like, yo, let's go. And we ended up doing a 5-day road trip in December, left Boston December 1st, 2017, and ended up in San Diego December 5th. And man, even going through that process right there was a struggle because, we were in Yuma, Arizona, and the job that I had applied for, they decided to call me and tell me they've given it to somebody else. And would I like to come in and apply for something else? And I'm like, well, yeah, I got no other choice. I got no family, no friends. And then, so we get into San Diego, and then the house we were trying to rent, they didn't want us. So we ended up being homeless for 5 weeks in hotels until we finally got into a house. Thank God it wasn't anything as bad as I've seen it on the streets. Like, we weren't homeless for like weeks and weeks and months and years. It was actually very just, it was only for 5 weeks. And even the apartment we looked at, the house that we looked at, believe it or not, when we went to tour it, there was people still living in there.
Really?
Oh yeah, man. And I was like, yo, we'll take it. Like, we'll take it. Like, what else we gonna do? And believe it or not, we're still there.
Wow. And it's amazing how, and this has happened in my life too, where you'll feel a calling and you go to fulfill that calling, and then there's trial after trial after trial. And you kind of reach a point where it's like, Lord, you're telling me to do this, but I keep running into these obstacles. And what I found in my own personal life is that's part of the journey, is that you go through these trials, and sometimes God calls us to do things so that we can go through the trials to strengthen us, and it helps us build appreciation for finally when everything comes together, you know?
No, I totally agree. I mean, it was this was 2017, so the Alpha tents weren't up yet, and I would go outside the hotel and see people get their blankets and make their beds on the sidewalk, and I was like, "What?" Like, I've never seen anything like that. I was totally traumatized, and it was like it was a really hard time for me. And for me to be in that situation and to do the work that I'm doing, is it's only the Lord. It's only the Lord, because I could not, even in that point, I couldn't see myself doing it. I was like, I don't want to do this. This is not me, But we don't pick where God wants us to be. He kind of just throws us in the water a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And is that kind of what opened your eyes to making you want to get involved with helping the homeless, was going through that experience?
Well, you know what? Like I said, I got the job at the Salvation Army doing homeless outreach, and I was in between work at the time, and I was like, "Yeah, let me try that. Let me see what's up." And I ended up as soon as we got in, it was like I got in November 2019, and COVID happened March 2020,
Wow.
and so it was a lot of learning, a lot of building connections, a lot of like saying, hey, you know what? Who is this person? Who is that person? Every week, everything was changing. So it was a really strenuous time. But I did notice the consistency was the people who weren't getting as sick was the homeless. And I was like, man, because they stuck to the group that they were in. And it was really cool for me to see that and to understand that and really understand the dynamics of it. The way the homeless situation is, we have this image, for example, that every homeless person is, not mentally stable. Every homeless person is um a bad person. We have this image, but then you see people that are coming together to support one another in the homeless community, and I thought that was really interesting for me, especially when they don't have anything, but yet they're looking out for one another.
Absolutely. And I noticed that in the homeless outreaches that I've done. I went to Skid Row at the beginning of 2021 and did some homeless outreaches. And I went to Albertsons and different stores and spoke with the
Right.
managers and asked them if they would be willing to donate food, that we were going to do this homeless outreach. And it was amazing. The manager smiled and he said, come meet me around the side. And he had two shopping carts, half filled, both of them, with baked good, cakes, donuts,
Yeah.
bread, all of this food. And I feel like God guided me to meet with that man and how that played out. But my point is that while I was on Skid Row, I would give out the food, and the people were so willing to share it with each other. None
Yeah.
of them were not, exactly. None of them were trying to hoard it to themselves. I immediately watched them take the food to their friends, and on the streets, homeless people, their friends or their family,
Right.
and their concern wasn't for themselves; it was to care for one another.
Right.
And one of the men that I met on one of the blocks, because I don't know if you've been to Skid Row, but
I
it's
have.
literally, you have?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's tents upon tents as far as you can see in every direction. And on one of the blocks, I met this guy. He called himself Pastor Blue, and he said, "This is my block." And he's like, "I take care of these people." And he had a tent set up that had Bibles in it, just so that people had somewhere to go and sit and pray and read the Word of God, which I
Mm.
felt like was really inspiring. But that, to go back to what you were speaking on earlier, there's that image or that stigma about homeless people, that they have mental disorders, or they may be drug addicts, or that they're bad people. They must have done something bad to be put in the situation. But
Right.
the more interviews that I've done and the more groups that I've gotten to know, I mean, there was one interview I did a few weeks ago about a single mother who was her rent went up with like $300, and because of that $300 jump, she ended up homeless. She lost her job because she needed to take care of her kids, and she was living out of her car for 4 months. And in no way was that her fault. It was the fact that rent was increased. And so it's part of why I'm doing this show and why I like to talk to people like you, so that we can break that stigma of people who are struggling with addiction. Yes, there is mental illness. And the other issue is that sometimes people will end up on the streets, but then they develop a mental illness because of the situation and being on the street, and the anxiety and the stress that they're feeling of not knowing where they're going to sleep every night and not knowing where their next meal is going to come from. It can create a lot of anxiety and a lot of mental distress, and which perpetuates the problem. Is that something that you've noticed?
Oh man, I've noticed a lot. I mean, so here's the deal, right? There are three basic needs in humanity, in all of humans all over the world, is food, clothing, and what? Shelter. All throughout humanity. When you don't have food, you stress. When you don't have clothing, you stress. And I mean food with food and water. You don't have shelter, you stress. And so now we're looking at basic human rights and basic human morals that are being like not treated equally, because we're paying for it now. Like you said, that woman with $300 rent increase, that $300 was out of her budget. I mean, to afford a car, to afford insurance, because you have to have insurance with a car, gas prices, especially if you're in California. I mean, my gas prices out here in San Diego are over $5. Like that's a whole bill in itself, right? Let's not talk about registration. Just all this alone for the car. Let's not talk about if you need your license renewed, just for the car. And then let's just say that's $300 right there. How are you going to pay the rent? How are you going to take care of everything? And now you don't take care of the rent, then you get the eviction. And the eviction goes on your record. Now it's harder for you to get a place. And it's just almost like this cycle. And we actually need better rent control here than I think anywhere else. I think we really need it, because we need a situation where people are not getting kicked out of their homes because the rent keeps jumping up 200%. People are not getting kicked out of their homes simply because they lost their job. And that, I hear that a lot, is that someone lost their job and all of a sudden it kind of spirals. The job market right now is so crazy. Not everybody can get a job right now. You know what I mean? So I've seen a lot of it. And without those things, you do gain a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety. And those are considered mental illnesses. And so what do you do if you don't have the pills to take it? You take the drugs, right? So.
Yeah, and then there's a lot of situations, just like you said, that people can be led into addiction because of self-medicating,
Oh,
because
yeah.
they become homeless.
Of course. Of course. I think dealing with homelessness is a big issue. We have an idea that if we just take somebody off the streets and put them in a home, that will be the end of it. That won't be the end of it. We have to deal with the root issues, such as mental issues, drug addiction, just all the other isms that are going with it. You know what I mean? And so we need full wraparound services as well as housing to make it work. But if you just give housing and no wraparound services, it's not going to work. If you give just a little bit of resources here and a little bit of resources there, then all we're doing is just putting a Band-Aid on the situation.
Yeah.
And I'm not in for Band-Aids. I want to be completely healed, right? If we're talking Jesus, right? We're talking Jesus ministry, right? Jesus healed people, right? There's nowhere in the Bible that Jesus put a Band-Aid on anybody. Can you give me that scripture? I don't know if there's a scripture like that. I have not read it, but Jesus has never put a Band-Aid on anybody, but he has healed people. And we need to be in a position where we're actually healing people, not just putting a Band-Aid on it.
I completely agree. And I really like the way that you worded that too, because if you're just putting a Band-Aid on it, you're not treating the underlying issue. And it's the same way with homelessness as it is with addiction, because if you don't treat the underlying trauma that led them to be into that place, there's no way. You're just going to continue. They're doomed to continue the same cycle over and over. A lot of women who are homeless are in some cases are escaping domestic abuse, and they're fearful for their life and for the lives of their children. So they're leaving their house not because of rent, but because they're trying to get away from an abusive situation. And unless we heal those underlying traumas, then how are they ever going to escape and rise above it into something more? And it's the same way with addiction. I've done many interviews about addiction and the road to recovery, and the common theme is treating the underlying trauma so that the person is healed enough to a point where they can be functioning and they can sustain a job again and they can be a productive part of society. Of course, with the programs, you've gotten 53 people off the streets, which is such an incredible number. Could you tell us a little bit about what that program looks like?
Okay, so we originally, the original name is For I Was. And so let me explain how that started first before we get into all that. For I Was I was trying to do a food distribution, and I think one of the food banks was like, "Oh, you got to do it yourself first," and it was this problem. And I said, "Forget this, I'm not doing that." And so I got angry and I created For I Was, and the idea means something like just like Matthew 25. For I was hungry, for I was thirsty, for I was, and it means past tense, right? It means that you're no longer in the situation anymore. I'm no longer in that. I was, and so I ended up doing. I used to take my own money, and do $25 grocery outlet gift cards for 5 families in all of San Diego County. So I have people sign up and we pick 5 families for all of San Diego County. And we did that for a little bit. Then somebody donated $6,000 to this program so that we could do $100 grocery outlet gift cards. And we did that for 5 families. So, it was amazing. It's a start. We started it. Then somebody else came in, see how God kind of increased it. And then when I decided to go on my own and do homeless outreach, I did it under For I Was. And so For I Was has kind of evolved a little bit more. We've now got a lot of volunteers, a decent amount of volunteers. And we've kind of, for the homeless outreach side of For I Was, it's called the HIT Squad, the Homeless Information Team. And so we're going out there and just reaching so many people right now. So yeah, that's kind of what it is. But how did we do it? We did it with partners. We were not exclusive to any one shelter. We are tapping into all of them. We are tapping into safe parking. We are tapping into safe sleeping. We are tapping into domestic violence shelters. We are tapping into any kind of shelters that we can get our hands onto to get people off the streets. You know what I mean? Whether temporary or permanently. So we've gotten people off temporary in different shelters. And then we've also got people that we also did a little bit of rental assistance. And I could tell you we're in August, this month, a couple of weeks ago, we helped somebody that was homeless get into their apartment because we was able to provide the first month's rent check.
That's incredible. And really, sometimes that's all that someone really needs. And
Yeah.
because you're not sticking a band-aid on it, you're giving them that during that month, that gives them a nice place to sleep. They can shower to prepare for job interviews, and they can get a job. If they were to get a job in that first week or two, then they get their first paycheck, and then they can pay next month's rent. And
Well,
so,
well, real quick, this person actually applied for a job. She got all her clearances back. She ended up in another program that covers 6 months of her rent. And she got her daughter back. And so now I'm in constant contact with them. And now they're doing wonderful. She just finished 30 days of sobriety as well. So and she is saying that, you know, God took the taste of wanting drugs out of her mouth.
wow, that's beautiful. That is truly beautiful. And I'm just going to take a moment to remind our listeners, you're listening to KNSJ 89.1 FM. This is Alive to Thrive. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Shane Aguero. He's the executive pastor of the Church of Salvation. And to go further into that, when those needs are met, it's like you said, God took that desire, that taste out of her mouth. And I think that there's, excuse me, there's a spiritual aspect to that, but there's also a psychological aspect to that too, because when, like we were talking about earlier, when you have all the stresses of being homeless, that you feel, you know, destitute, and you would want to use to try and deal with the pain that you're struggling with or the anxiety. And so there's that physical aspect, but that's beautiful to hear that the Lord literally took the taste of wanting it out of her mouth, and you guys were able to give her the opportunity to maintain that safety to keep her progressing forward.
Yes.
With the other 53 people that you've helped, is that going through a similar process? And what is the name of the program that helped with 6 months of rent?
I wouldn't know. I don't know her program, but what I can do is I can tell you that not every case is the same.
Yeah,
Not every case is the same. You know, we're talking about mental health, and you were talking about, you know, the being on the streets and the anxiety. And it brought me to the story of the guy with the Legion of Demons, right? Like he was full of those demons. And if you notice, before he could even follow Jesus, he had to get the demons out. He had to get the clarity out. He had to get it all out of him, right? And Jesus cast those demons into a pig, to a herd of pigs. And so, but then as soon as he was healed, the first thing he wanted to do was follow Jesus, right? And I think that's what happens with a lot of people, is that the demons that they're fighting, or we call them dragons, and within our church, we call it dragons. We call ourselves dragon slayers. So the dragons that we're facing, a lot of times we have to help eliminate some of those dragons before we can get the inkling or the knowledge to really get to the next step. And then once you have those dragons defeated, it's almost like you have a new taste for something different. You can't put old wine, new wine in an old wineskin, right? So this is what's going on with people. We can't expect new wine in the same mental process. We have to change that. We have to get them housing ready. We have to make sure that we're teaching them, you know, the right skills and the right things, so that when they do finally get in, that they're not just going right back on the street, but that they're going in and they're staying in and they're more capable. You know, if you imagine trying to tell that man with the Legion of Demons to just follow Jesus and he'll be all right, it wouldn't have worked. You know, there had to be a clarity first. There had to be a removal first. And I think that's what's going to happen with a lot of people. And I feel like that's what happens with people in general, is that they get the removal of whatever the issue is, and then they are then they start wanting what God has for them.
And it's so true because it reminds me of like the metaphor of if you're walking around and your hands are full of all of this regret or trauma or just turmoil, grief, anxiety, and your arms are full, and then someone, God comes to you and says, Here, I want to give you peace or joy or prosperity. If your hands are full, you can't take it because your
No.
hands are full. You have to clear it out, as you were saying. You need to clear out that space to provide room for the good to come in. And
Right.
then once that good is put in and people can see the fruits that start to enter their lives
Right.
and the blessings of things working out, then they don't want to go back to what was before because they feel all the gratitude for the peace and the prosperity that they're currently feeling from these new fruits that they're given.
Of course. I mean, I think that's all of us when we start getting into recognition of who Jesus is, right? And we're like, man, I've been missing out on this my whole life. What? Like that's a whole thing. And I think for people that are coming off drugs or mental illness and they're able to see clearly, when Jesus healed the guy and he spit in the mud, right? And then he wiped the guy's eyes and he says, oh man, I see, men walking like trees, right? Like trees walking like men. I can't paraphrasing. And then he said, what do you see again? And then he was able to see clearly. I think a lot of times people are in that middle stage and they think that's it, not realizing that there's another stage they can see for better clarity. And we got to help them. We can't just say we want to help the homeless people and then we don't show them love. We don't help them get to the next level. We don't help them in the way that we can, So that's what it is.
Absolutely. And I think that clarity is what a lot of people need, and having that understanding. So without that clarity, it's almost like they're walking around in darkness and there's a light switch right there on the wall.
Right.
But unless someone helps guide you to the light switch and turn that light on, then it's impossible for some people to ever get out of those traps.
Right.
Could you tell us a little bit about the work that you did with the Salvation Army that kind of kicked off into all of this?
The work I did, well, Salvation Army is a very big organization. I have a lot of respect for them. I still connect with them on different projects that I do. It was just a lot of phone calls we were getting in, and we were navigating people to different shelters and different places. It was cool. It was great. I loved my office. I loved the things I was doing. I loved my partner, but I felt like it was a time for me that, let me see what I can do. I've always been an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur since I was 17. And my goal was, and I always said to the Lord, let this be my last job, but let me stay at this job until I'm able to work for the church full time, and that's exactly what the Lord did. And that's what he gave me. And so there was a lot of connects that I made while I was there, people that pointed me in the right direction. And, I was like, man, you know what, we could do this. And, like I said, 53 people is exceeding expectations in the last few months. We've already at 9 people housed in this new quarter as well. So just in the new quarter, we're already jumping, you know what I mean? So it's crazy. But that's because I have people who are willing and fighting and partners who are saying, hey, you know what? We want to help get these people off the streets. If you got, I got people that have come to me and said, hey, you know anybody in safe parking? As of yesterday, somebody said, hey, I pretty much run this safe parking lot. If you got anybody that need it, call me. I got his cell number. I don't got his office line. I got his cell number. I got people that I can call. I've made a essence of mine to make sure I stay connected with a lot of people. And that way, we can actually help people get off the streets. I don't want to just talk about it. I want to be effective. Nothing Jesus did was semi-effective. It was always effective. It was life-changing. And that's what I want to continue to do.
And I think that's fantastic. And really working with other organizations, I think that is hugely beneficial because there's so many different groups in San Diego that want to do good, that want to help people. But without networking, there's so many people who fall through the cracks. And that's been one of the biggest disconnects. And part of why I wanted to get into this work was that I noticed that there were all of these organizations that want to help people. And you have all these people who are suffering, but the people who are suffering don't know that these organizations exist. They don't know how to contact them. They don't know how to bridge that gap, essentially, and get the resources that they need. And so I think that's part of the reason why you've been so impactful and why you've helped get 53 people off the street, is because you're using the networks that are available to help them get the resources that they need. I'm going to remind our listeners again, you're listening to KNSJ 89.1 FM. I'm your host, Mitchell Murphy. This is Alive to Thrive. We're not on this earth made to survive. We are alive to thrive. We have the honor today of speaking with Shane O'Garo. He's the executive pastor of the Church of Salvation. And so as you've been building, and I know you explained how you started small with lower donations and gifting to people, and then you have this larger donation, it's really a perfect example of small and simple things, line upon line, precept upon precept, that if you, and I put that challenge out there for all of our listeners, that if you have a desire to go out and make a difference in the world, trust that desire that you have inside of you. Start taking those small, simple steps, because it's through small, simple steps that great things are accomplished. It really is the key to succeeding and prosperity. And it's the same way for the people who are homeless, that they need just to take small, simple steps. And so as you were talking, before that person that you were mentioning that got the first month of rent paid, so did they take certain steps of working on lining up a job?
Oh, man. Yeah. So let me you're preaching to me, and I'm hearing scriptures, how God will bless you with little before he bless you with much, right? And that's really what it is. And the person that did it, yeah, she was working on it, but it just wasn't coming together. And when I came into her life, I said, focus on today. Don't worry about doing any drugs. Don't worry about doing anything that is detrimental to you. Focus on today. Don't focus on tomorrow. Don't focus on yesterday. Focus on today. And then when tomorrow comes, we focus on tomorrow, right? Jesus said, if God takes care of the birds of the air, right, how much more will he take care of you? Be anxious for nothing, right? So there we go. We're living it out. And I think, honestly, that is the main reason why we were able to get so many people off the streets, is because we're living out the scriptures. We're living them out. Like you said, take one step at a time. Well, God will bless you in little before he bless you in much, right? Don't be anxious for nothing, right? Like these little steps, these little things, we're living them out. And I think by living out the Bible, God ends up blessing our lives and blessing the people that we're going to help as well.
Right. And replacing those negative habits with positive ones, because unless you replace something negative with something positive, there's always that possibility of something worse taking its place. But I really like how you said that, to focus on the present, because it's all about, that's all that we truly have control over. Right. We can't control what happened yesterday. We can't completely control what's happening tomorrow unless we take control of today.
Right.
And I find so many times that people focus so much on the things that they can't control that they lose control over the things that they can control, and then they're out of control, right? And so you have to focus on what you can control, and what you can control is today. It's the present. It's a gift. That's why it's called the present. And you just need to take that for what it is. I have a saying that it goes, accept the past, embrace the present, enjoy the future. And it's a 3-step plan. Once you accept the past, you accept whatever happened yesterday, that happened, you can embrace the present. You're embracing today. Then you have the opportunity to enjoy the future, because otherwise people get trapped in the past. And I've been working on a book for a period of time, but in part of it, I talk about if you're working on progressing and imagine you're walking up a flight of stairs. If you take 2 steps forward and you look back at the step behind you, and you're like, oh, did I like the view back there better? Well, I was more comfortable back there, 2 steps back. So if you I'll take 1 step back. Well, and then you're like, well, it's like you cannot progress and continue going up the staircase towards happiness and prosperity and having all of your needs met if you're constantly looking back at the past and thinking about how things used to be. And that's a big part of drug addiction and why there's chronic homelessness, because people get trapped in that cycle, and they just end up, instead of walking up the stairs, they go to sleep on the stairs. They literally, in some cases, they get stuck in that perpetual cycle of addiction and alcoholism. And it's not until you walk confidently forward and trust the process and each step. Steve Jobs has a saying that you cannot connect the dots looking forward, but you can connect the dots looking back across your life. And you have to trust that the dots will align in your future as you go forward on your pathway to success.
Well, yeah, I'm listening to you, and I'm getting up 2 things in my mind. One is the scripture, forgetting those things behind and pressing towards the mark of the high calling, right? That's really what you're saying. But 2, God, I've noticed that God doesn't allow us to stay in our comfortability long. God, like, if you want to progress and you want to do something life-changing, you want to do something amazing, God has this big plan. He shows you. He doesn't allow you to stay in your comfortability too long. Elijah is a great example, at the Mount of Carmel, and Elijah won the challenge at Mount Carmel and killed all of Jezebel's priests, then runs. Then he goes by the creek, and he's by the creek and the birds, and he's comfortable there. He's comfortable. And then what does God tell him? Get up and go. Like the creek dries up, the birds start, it's like, get up and go. You're comfortable enough. Now it's time to move forward. And I think that's where not just our homeless population, but us in our lives, we have to recognize what God is doing and seeing, sometimes coming down that step, like you said, it might be more comfortable because the next step might be a little bit more challenging, but the reward is so much better on the next step up. The reward is going to be so much better. And I think that's what we have to continue, even with the work that we're doing, the work that you're doing, and even for the homeless people, they are struggling to get to that next step. We might be 10 or 20 steps ahead, and they're just on the first 2 or 3, but each step is a reward that's worth climbing those steps for.
I completely agree. And I agree with where God won't let us stay in one place and be comfortable for too long, because the only way for us to grow is to get out of our comfort zone. We have to get out of that comfortability in order to grow. And sometimes bad things happen to people, and it seems like people will say, God, why are you doing this to me? Why is this happening to me? And really, God knows what's 10 steps ahead. And he's
Right.
like, hey, you needed a wake-up call. You need this bad thing to happen to you so that you could have the push that you need to get out of your comfort zone, so that you could get the help that you need, so that you can rise above this. Because further down the road, that's up the staircase. That's
Right.
where true happiness is. And it's going up the stairs. You gain, like you said, there's blessings. There's you gain strength. And that's perfect metaphor, because going up a flight of stairs, you're literally building your physical strength and spiritual strength metaphorically, as you overcome each step. And what I've noticed in my personal life is that anytime you set a spiritual goal, there's always going to be a trap, because the adversary wants to have power over us. And he knows if we succeed spiritually, that we'll have power over him. So there's always going to be a trap. And so, like for people struggling with addiction, for instance, if they choose that I'm going to get sober, I guarantee there's going to be a trap. But if you recognize that a lot of this is psychological warfare, and
Right.
you know that there's a trap that's going to be there, you prepare yourself spiritually and mentally and physically to that. I know there's going to be a trap, and you're aware of it mentally, that when that trap arises, you see it for what it is, and you're like, aha, I see what you're trying to do. You're trying to get me to fall into the pit, and you step over it. And when you step over it, you receive power, strength, and knowledge, and then you continue forward on the path, and there's always going to be another trap. And
Right.
then you have to step over it, and you get more strength. And we're all going to make mistakes. We all are going to fall sometimes. And that's why Jesus Christ atoned for our sins in the first place.
Right.
And so you just have to, if you find yourself in the pit, you call out for help immediately. And for me in my life, it was like a beacon turned on and led me over to a ladder. And the ladder was there the whole time. I just didn't recognize it because I was lost in the darkness. And I climbed out of the pit. I got on the path, and there's always another trap, but you just have to be aware of the psychological warfare that's taking place, and be aware of the tools that you need to overcome those spiritual traps is the word of God.
Well, let me ask you a question. The Bible says the name of the Lord is do you know? It's a strong tower, right? The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The name of the Lord is a strong tower that the righteous run in and are safe, right? So the name of the Lord is a strong tower, which is a fortified tower, and the righteous run in, those who are, and they become safe. What's the name that we're supposed to be using as we fall? We use the name Jesus, because no man can be saved by any other name than the name Jesus. And so as we continue to go, we got to remember, as we go into those pits, we got to remember the name that we need to call on, which is a strong tower that which we could be saved by, and which is the name of Jesus.
Absolutely. I completely agree. I'll use this moment to remind our listeners you're listening to KNSJ 89.1 FM. This is Alive to Thrive. I've really enjoyed this conversation. We have about 15 minutes left. We have the honor today of talking with Shane O'Garo. He is the executive pastor of the Church of Salvation. And so to get into more of the logistics of the processes that you're worked with these 53 different people, I know that you mentioned that you do an outreach that's on Mondays in Levin Grove, from 2:30 to 4:30, and starting on September 11th in Mira Mesa, it'll be from 3:30 to 4:30. So I know that you mentioned earlier in the show that you've had other people from 211 or different organizations that these homeless people have been brought to you with. Have these outreaches that you do, is it providing like food services, and then you get to know what the person's situation is, and then guide them to these networks that we've been discussing?
Well, let me take it from there, right? We started out in Lemon Grove. I started out, and then the communities came around me and supported me in what I was doing. And what we were doing was going out, doing intakes on these people, also giving them food and clothing. We ended up getting so much clothes donated, we had to stop people from donating clothes. We got food that was being given out, and we sit down and we're not like oh, you know, come get a prayer and then we'll give you. No, we're like, you know what? Let's sit down. Let's hear your story. Let's give you some food. Whether you want to do an intake or not, we're gonna give you some food. Whether you want to sit with us or not, we'll if we got water, we'll give you water. We're all about showing love. Jesus didn't put any demands on people to get healed, right? He just said, you know what, you're healed. You know, and that's the way we live. You know, if we show our love, if we show the work of God that we're doing, if we're showing people, then maybe they'll say, hey, you know what? There's something that'll click in them and say, maybe I might want to know more about Jesus. And I remember the church that helped me when I was homeless. Maybe I might want to know more about, you know, getting out of this situation. Maybe I will call that church, you know, because a lot of the times what we do is just show love. If they're on the streets and we say, hey, you know what's going on? What's happening? How you been? How's the weather? Do you got any clothes for the rain? Or where you sleeping tonight? What are you doing? Not everybody wants to get off the streets right now. Those that do want to get off the streets, we try to sit down with them and say, all right, what's the plan? Well, have you gone and got some mental health? You gotten your pills together? You know what I mean? Are you looking for a job? What are you doing? Yeah, I know you're sleeping on the streets, but what can we do to help get you to the next level so that you could be in the right place, right? You know, and that's some of the things that Lemon Grove has been huge for that, because the homeless community knows us, the homeless community thrives with us. They know that we're out there to really help them, you know. And now I'm not physically doing it, but we still have a team that's out there on Mondays at between 2:30 and 4:30. But you could definitely reach out to on our website and sign up for that. I don't know if we're gonna do it tomorrow, just because of not tomorrow, this Monday, just because of that huge storm. But you know, we're gonna be but normally bearing any weather incidents when we're normally out there on Mondays. And so we're asking people to sign up. Mira Mesa has been great. That's the area I actually live in. And the city council has given us blankets for when we start our outreach on September 11th. And that's going to be from 3:30 to 4:30. And we're so excited because a lot of people are already talking about joining that. And these are and I've met with a lot of the homeless people that are out here. A lot of them have never done an intake, have, you know, not in any of the systems. So it's going to be really cool. And I love the outreach that we're doing, because it really changes the dynamic and the mindset of how we see homeless people. When people come out and they're saying, hey, you know what? Homeless people are this way and that way. And then they speak to somebody who has been through some things, like you said, who was sleeping in their car, who's rent, you know what I mean? It's like, man, this is not what the media portrays. This is not what we really think it is. This is a lot deeper than what it is. And, you know, I've seen people in the Lemon Grove area who used to be afraid of, you know, the homeless come out, volunteer, and then boom, they're the ones talking to the police like, don't harass these people, don't bother. Like, I'm like, whoa, calm down. I don't need anybody getting arrested on my team, right? So, you know, it's been a great view, and taking that same model that we did in Lemon Grove and bringing it out to Mira Mesa, and then working both of them on Mondays at the same time. I mean, that is amazing. That's going to be wonderful. You're going to see a lot of people. We're going to see a lot of people. So, and especially with this encampment being going on. So,
yeah, and that's so exciting to hear how that, like we were talking about at the beginning of the show, there's that stigma about homeless people, that you can that some people are afraid of homeless people, but to help change their mind once they actually start to get to know that these are just normal people that fell on hard times and they're just trying to get out of it in a
Right,
lot of cases. They
right.
just need a little assistance and a little help. And it's amazing to hear that you can help change that stigma. I mean, that's part of the reason why I do this show, is to try and break the stigma and realize that there are so many good people and they just need a little help. And I think that part of why your program has been so successful is because you're meeting their immediate needs, giving them food, but then you're talking to them and asking, how are you doing? You're giving them that respect. And I
Right.
feel like there's so many homeless people that have lost their sense of dignity because it's been stripped away by them from all these people just walking by them and ignoring them and feeling like they're worthless. I mean, you can imagine what that does to a person's self-esteem. But when you take the time to show that they have value just by asking them how they're doing and showing that love that you were talking about, and that can light a fire in them because we can't, as human beings, we cannot progress if we're caught up in a cycle of self-hatred towards ourselves because
Right.
we don't believe that we deserve more unless we have that self-dignity, unless we have that self-esteem. And sometimes it takes someone else helping reinstill that in us to be like, I have value. I may be homeless and I lost everything, but I still have value. And by talking with them and showing compassion and love towards them, it really lights a fire in people. And it's amazing how many people go from being homeless to getting involved to help other homeless people and actually join organizations to help do that work. I was curious, you mentioned the intake form. What is that process like?
So the intake form is really simple. So we have a database that we use as well as the county approved database that we use. So the issue with the county approved database, only certain people have access to it. So in order for me to be more efficient, um, we use a database that we developed, and we have a front facing section of it. Only 4 people have access behind the scenes. Our ILA partner GLM, who is able to go behind it and say, hey, you know what, I read the notes on somebody and I could get them into, I got a room that's available. They might see if they might be able to fit that. And 2 of our staff and myself. Um, and what it is that intake form asks different questions like, are you a vet, male, female? Do you have any mental issues, alcohol, drug abuse? You know, the whole nine. It goes through, and then we have a little note section that because the way our intake works is you will call our main number at 619-722-0753, hit 1, and then you hit 1 again. That would take you to the intake person that asks you all these questions. That intake then goes to the to our hit coordinator, and that coordinator will then call that person back and say, hey, you know what? I see you did an intake with one of our people. How can we help you? You know, my coordinator has been really, really good. She's been working, like we have a person that's pregnant and homeless and trying to get them into a shelter, trying to get them into the right place. You know, she was able to get a family, a mother and a son into a safe parking. It's just been a lot of different things that we've been able to do. But that's her job, is to find the resources that will best fit that person.
Well, and that's a huge part of it is understanding what needs are available. And that makes sense to help keep it organized, right? And to help direct them where they need to go. And so I can see why that's been so beneficial. And I appreciate the fact that you don't pressure them to do that in order for them to receive your services. You
No.
give them the freedom to choose. They can still get food, they can still get clothing, and then they have the option to receive additional help and benefits. Because a lot of people that I met personally in San Diego when I did homeless outreaches, they're from all over the United States, and they have no idea what services are even available. And that's what we were talking about earlier in the show. There's that disconnect between the people who need help and the people who can offer help, and building that bridge. But it seems like by using these intake forms and really having a better understanding of their circumstances, it helps guide them to where they need to go to get the help that they need.
And also too, when you force people to your will on them, that's not free choice, that's abuse, right? When you are forcing them to accept Jesus, that's not out of love, that's out of desperation. And we know that that's not the way God wants us to be. He gave us free choice so that we could accept them freely with love out of our whole heart. If we're forced, you can't force somebody to love you, because if you do that, then we're just abusing them. So that's also another reason. That's why we don't want to do that. We don't want to be abusers. They've already had enough trauma in their life. We want to be the helpers.
Yeah, you want to be the healers.
Yeah.
And we've got about 3 minutes left of the show. It's been such a pleasure talking to you, Shane. I'll remind our listeners one more time, you're listening to KNSJ 89.1 FM. I am your host, Mitchell Murphy. This is Alive to Thrive. And in the last 3 minutes of the show, are there any closing thoughts that you would like to discuss?
Yeah, you know what? I'll tell you this. As a small organization, as a church that is actually doing some work, forgive me for saying actually, but as a church that is doing homeless outreach and doing work in the community, we're always looking for financial funding, man. It's hard to get funding to support the work that we're doing. Right now we have volunteers, but in order to keep our volunteers and eventually help them to become greater and better in the roles that they're doing, we want to be able to start helping to support not just the families on the streets, but the families that are actually helping the families on the streets. Too many times we've seen so many people that are doing homeless outreach that are homeless themselves. And so right now we're looking for people to help. Not everybody can join a Monday outreach, but the financial support to help keep this going, to help do the work that's really amazing. That's what we need. That's what, and like I said, you can do that at our website, thechurchofsalvation.org, and that's kind of where we are right now, is how do we let people know to keep funding the work that we're doing. And that's why, when I got offered this, I wanted to let people know, like, yeah, we are doing the work. We are helping people. Every day we're doing it. But if we don't have the funding to keep going, then we won't be able to help those many people that we can.
Absolutely. That makes perfect sense. And in the last few minutes, will you please share where your outreaches are taking place and the times?
Mondays in Lemon Grove at the Big Lemon from 2:30 to 4:30. You could give us a call or send us an email, or visit our website at thechurchofsalvation.org. And then September 11th from 3:30 to 4:30 at the Mira Mesa Recreational Center in Mira Mesa.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you again, Shane. And thank you for tuning in to Alive to Thrive. Remember, we are not on this earth merely to survive. We are alive to thrive. Shane, it has been a pleasure, and I will have to have you on again before September 11th so we can help bring awareness.
Anytime. Let me know, man. It was a pleasure doing this.
Thank you so much. And I hope that everyone has a good week. Tune in again next Saturday from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. for another show of Live to Thrive. And we'll see you all next week.
See ya.